Well, China's economy today has risen by 5.4% in the first quarter amidst the US tariff escalation. That's as the country's economic growth for the first 3 months of the year beat expectations, fueled by higher retail sales and industrial output. The Indian stock market ended with robust gains for the second consecutive session amid easing trade war jitters and a growing belief that India will remain relatively less impacted by US tariffs. These tariffs were putting pressure on the country's economy and trade, even as Beijing unveiled forecast beating first quarter growth. Here is what the Chinese Deputy Commissioner of the National Bureau of Statistics had to say, followed by the comment from the White House.
从短期来看呢，就是美国加征高额关税会对我们国家的这个外贸和经济带来一定的压力，但是改变不了中国经济持续长期向好的大势。中国经济基础稳，韧性强，潜力大，所以我们有底气、有能力、有信心应对外部挑战。
That option still on the table? Look, the president has made his position on China quite clear, although I do have an additional statement that he just shared with me in the Oval Office. The ball is in China's court. China needs to make a deal with us. We don't have to make a deal with them. There's no difference between China and any other country except they are much larger. And China wants what we have, what every country wants, what we have. The American consumer, or to put another way, they need our money. So the president.
The US is also restricting chip giant Nvidia's exports to China as part of a wider attempt to gain dominance in the semiconductor industry. Chips have become a battleground in the US-China race for tech supremacy. Further in updates, Trump tariffs are now threatening to push Apple to ramp up iPhone production in India, airlifting $2 billion worth of goods ahead of the deadline. Well, joining us to discuss these developments and the ongoing trade tensions is Ross Feingold, a political risk analyst joining us from Taipei, Taiwan. Ross, we heard there at the opening of the programme comments from China and the United States, the US saying the ball is firmly in the court of China. Is that the case in your opinion?
Yes, it is, and I think it signifies that, at least at the moment, the Trump administration is willing or even eager to have a negotiation with China over these issues, very similar to how the United States is in negotiations with numerous countries that were subject to the reciprocal tariffs, and that's an ongoing process. So it seems at the moment that the United States is willing to make some kind of deal with China. Any kind of deal is probably going to be similar to the so-called Phase 1 trade agreement that was reached in January 2020, which would involve China making commitments to buy very large amounts of U.S. products, and specifically energy like LNG, as well as agricultural products. So we have to wait and see. When will the two leaders talk? When will negotiating teams from the two sides engage? Although there's a lot of invective and angry statements flying back and forth, at some point they will have to engage with each other.
Yes, Ross, one of the biggest sectors which has been impacted throughout these tariff negotiations and tensions is, of course, the technology sector. Trump announcing that there will be a halt on some Nvidia exports to China. Also, Apple looking to make action, exporting $2 billion worth of goods from India. Why is the technology sector being specifically impacted so much?
There's an overarching concern about certain more advanced semiconductor chips could be used by the Chinese military, and given the possibility of war between Taiwan and China, which the United States may or may not get involved in, there's certainly a national security concern in the United States that the most advanced semiconductor chips might help the Chinese military. So I think, broadly speaking, we can understand the national security concern, although, of course, the majority of chips are going to wind up in consumer electronics, in automobiles, et cetera, et cetera. But this is a policy that really began under the first Trump administration and continued under the Biden administration, and it will continue in the second Trump administration to ensure that China's military does not gain a technological advantage over America or the United States' close allies in the Asia-Pacific region.
Yes, Ross, and to bring an end to this discussion, I do want to talk about the markets. There have been some uplift in global markets over the past couple of days. Do you think this is because there's been no escalation between China and the US? And what else might be a contributing factor in this?
I think the sell-off was so large that there's bargain hunting now. We also need to keep in mind that we're far away from any deal between the United States and China, even if both sides will eventually start talking to the other side. At the moment, there's still a lot of tension. As I said, there's invective flying back and forth. So I think there's some bargain hunting after the big sell-off that occurred in the days following Trump's reciprocal tariff announcement. I'd be hesitant to say it's because there's optimism in the markets.
Ross Feingold, thank you as always for joining us